Will it be strikes for Christmas in France, day 13 of a movement that's set to last if neither the government nor the unions blink? The big march in Paris this Tuesday had those unions united against the government's pension reform plan. The biggest test of Emmanuel Macron's presidency has Macron, who was able to outlast the yellow vests while passing labor reform, rail reform, unemployment insurance reform. This time, overreached. It's not just transport strikes, by the way. Teachers, hospital workers also out in numbers. It's the anxiety is not just over whether families will be united over the holidays. It's over whether France's cherished welfare state is accelerating its steady erosion. All sides agree reform is necessary, what with an aging population and too many disparate pension schemes. But is the reform fair? Emmanuel Macron has vowed to speak when the time is right. He's just lost, by the way, the architect of the reform done in by an ethics scandal. When the chips fall, will the French president have to scrap this, water down the reform, or go full steam ahead? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the French strikes. And with us, Mireille Clapeau, member of parliament for Emmanuel Macron's La République En Marche party. Thank you for being with us.
Hello.
We're also joined by Craig Kopitas, contributing editor to Quartz. And she's just back from the demos herself. Ingrid Burgo, a journalist at the local France, formerly of France 24 fame. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. It's not just transport strikes, by the way. There have been power cuts in the Lyon and Bordeaux areas, oil refineries blocked, teachers, hospital workers, lawyers, and demonstrations. Demonstrations throughout France to protest the plan to create a single unified pension plan with a points-based system and a pivot age for full retirement set at 64.
Our
main social demand is social justice. For many years, especially since this government took power, we've been seeing our social rights melt under the sun. And this is the straw that broke the camel's back.
If we take a break, then we're stopping the strike. If we don't strike, then he will push his reform through in January. So we have to stop him. We have to be logical. People didn't strike for about 15 days just to stop and say, no, let's go see Santa Claus.
Ingrid Burgo, is there going to be a Christmas break or not?
Well, that remains to be seen, right? That's the big question. Everyone
What were people telling
about
you?
that. So basically, people are saying exactly what the protester up on the screen was saying just now, that we've been going this far. We just can't back down right now. That was what most people were saying. Also because it's a big financial strain, right? Going on strike, you lose a day's worth of salary every time you're on strike, every day you're on strike, including weekends. So basically the workers are saying, the people that are striking are saying that we didn't expect to strike this long, but right now we don't really have a choice. That's what the narrative that I was getting today.
Mireille Clapeau, will there be strikes for Christmas?
Well, there will be a negotiation before Christmas, I'm sure of it.
In the morning, in fact.
Yes, and the negotiation has to start now because the plan was only announced 1 week ago. So there was no use for doing strike before the announcement. And what the Prime Minister announced is that part of the plan is fixed and part can be negotiated. And the part that has to be negotiated is the financial part, and it will include all the trade unions and the employers' organization. So therefore, there are still some discussions to be done.
Now, there was this sense that it was really a tale, and I'll turn back to Ingrid about this. The sense that it was two demonstrations in one. The hardline unions who who want the bill scrapped completely, and those that could come back to the negotiating table along the lines of what Mireille Clapeau is saying. Did you get a sense of that when you were out there?
Well, yeah, in a way. I think one of the most important things to remember here when we're foreigners talking about of course not you, but talking about the French strike is that it's complex. It's a very complex topic. There are a lot of unions. France has a lot of unions. So you have the teachers' unions, you have the rail workers' unions, and they were all participating today during the strike. And this is the first time today that you have the union which is called CFDT, which is known to be more they call it government friendly often when they talk about it. I see that
I would say progressive unions.
Progressive union, and then you have the more hardline union, for example, the CGT, who's known to be more on the left and more firm-handed when it comes to talks, and they take pride in that as well. So the reason the CFDT was participating in the strike today is the mentioned speech by Prime Minister Edouard Philippe earlier, where Edouard Philippe said that he would introduce, or the government would introduce, a pivot age of 64. And according to the CFDT, this was the red line that now has pushed them into the streets, and then we'll see if the government goes back on that pivot age.
And let's just be clear on this.
Yeah.
The pivot age. It means if you want your full pension, you're going to have to work until you're 64. Right now, the retirement age is 62 in France for most people.
To be more precise about this point, all the new social rights that are open for the women, for the portfolio careers, for the independent workers, etc., have to be financed. And the Prime Minister said, well, we know that there is an extra cost for that. We want to deal with it from now on. We give 2 years for a negotiation between the social partners, trade unions and organizations of employers. And if they are not able to find a solution to finance the system and to get to a balanced system in 2 years, then there will be a target system, which is a pivot age. So this is not decided that there is a pivot age. It's only a backstop in a way if they do not come to a solution.
All right, the backstop, the French backstop, if you will. It's an interesting way of putting it. But let me ask you: Can you tell our viewers straight right now? In the future, you're going to have to work longer before you get a full pension.
Well, the situations are very different. So there are people that start very early. And there are people that go to studies and they have to work longer. The situation is different whether you have a job that you like and that is comfortable to you, or whether you are a worker with difficult conditions, if you work during night, if you wear heavy burdens, etc. And therefore, what CFDT says is that there shouldn't be a unique pivot age, but anyway, they know that we have to finance the system.
Craig Capitis,
yes.
What's the future going to look like for? We're all living longer, and the median age is getting older.
Words are important, particularly in France. Words become more important when you're speaking English, which provides an inexact translation in French in a negotiation. You used a word before in the intro, erosion of the system. Wrong word. Macron was elected to metamorphosize this system, hopefully not Kafkaesque. And somewhere along the line, he's lost his communication skills with the unions and a lot of French people. Now, whether that's out of hubris, his imperialist tendencies or whatever, I don't know.
Because we heard somebody in the newsroom quip that it was a bit like the Dance of the Seven Veils, the way this reform was rolled out. First, there was the announcement, then he should have just announced it all in one go.
He should have just announced it. Look, France historically is first to protest, last to reform. Bless your hearts. But I think we have, before we go any further, I want to put this in some context. One of the wise men of France, whether you like him or not, is Jean-Claude Trichet, the former head of the
Bank of France and the ECB.
And the ECB. And he is one of France's wise men. And he is a supporter. He believes in Macron and what he's doing, because more than anyone in this country, someone who's been in the trenches with the socialists and with the right wing, okay, Trichet knows that these reforms are necessary. And he said, we talked about this, and he said, it's going to take a minimum of 10 years, if not longer, to change France, to reform France, to bring it into what we'll call the globalized modern world. And that's where Macron is right now. Now, the question I have, and I don't know.
But when it comes to pension reform, what's the future going to hold? Are people going to have to? They're going to have to work longer to get a full pension.
Yes, like they are in the United States and England and elsewhere. Welcome to the 21st century, people. Okay, and they're going to have to make changes, like have IRAs and 240Ks,
which are these private
allow it. We were talking
private
about
pension
this before.
funds.
An individual to manage his own future. It's not the age of when someone retires that's important. Everyone's getting hung up on the age. It's the amount of cash flow you have upon retirement. Can you survive on that cash flow, whether it's provided by the state, through donations to the state, or through your own investment process?
And France has one of the lowest rates of poverty among senior citizens in all of Europe right now.
Look, French pensions, for all of this problem, here's another news flash, they're pretty darn good. The French pension system, unlike just about any other private or government pension around the world, has prevented the hedge funds from coming in and taking over and bankrupting the pension systems. We've seen this, in Detroit when the automakers in the States went bankrupt.
So the introduction of private pension plans, does that perhaps threaten that?
The French have been very good about keeping hedge funds out of the French business. They exist. There have to be controls. There have to be stopgaps. But I believe, you tell me, does Macron want to allow French citizens to manage their own private funds for a pension? Penalty if you take the money out of the account before the age of retirement. What is El Presidente going to tell us about that? What's the answer?
The principle of this reform is that we want to maintain a system that we call by repartition. It's a solidarity. The people who work pay for the people who are retired. This is very important. It's a state
You didn't
pension.
answer my question, with apologies. My question is this. Will the Macron government allow French citizens to use their own money instead of paying into a state pension, to pay into their own, what we'll call a private IRA or 240K plan, to incur their own cash flow for retirement, penalizing the holder of that account if they tap into the money before retirement? That's the question.
Maybe I have to repeat what I explained. The basis of the reform was to have something, a fairer system, and a simpler system to allow the women, to allow the independent workers, etc., to have a fair level.
Seeing as we don't have I'm just going to repeat what the unions have told me today because I'm here as a journalist, but we don't have any union members here yet. The problem that most people that are striking right now are saying is that they're all these words. It's all about fairness and solidarity. But they're dead scared. They're really, really, really scared. They're losing a lot of money. Everyone I talked to today said that they won't have enough money to buy Christmas gifts, like some, but not as they usually
That's
do.
over the strikes themselves.
Yeah, that's over the strikes. Absolutely. But that's. I'm just saying that's why they're striking.
But the bigger anxiety is the one that Craig Capitas mentioned, which is this fact that, well, we're going to have to work longer. And there's the question of how we're going to finance pensions when you have an aging population.
Yes, and that was what I want to explain, is that we have to find the money for it, but the basis of it is not a money topic. So people...
But it is included in the reform plan that there is the introduction now of private pension schemes that are sort of being encouraged within the system.
No.
It's not the cornerstone.
There are
but
a
it is
lot of
included.
fake news. One of the fake news is that people will have less money. This is not true at all. And for example, the teachers, of course, we have to change something in the system because today it's calculated on the last 6 months, and it will be calculated with points. So we have to change something in the system.
That's a problem for the teachers because they usually work for years with very low salaries, and then
yes, but we are going to completely change the system.
So the teachers will earn more money.
we want to preserve the level of pensions. The calculation will be different, and if you have a stable career, it's different if you start very low and have a very high salary during the last months. And we are going to change the rules, but not to decrease the level, but to maintain the level for the workers, the teachers, and to improve it for the women and for the portfolio careers.
Yeah, just to explain briefly the system, because it's kind of complicated. So basically right now, as she was describing, a teacher is underlying a system where the last 6 months determine what your pension will be. So that means that you get a compensation for earning very little money for many years, right? And then you have the whole system, which is kind of, if you're in the private sector, for example, where you get the 25 best years of your career, which will then determine your pension. And the new system will be points-based, which means that for every euro that you earn,
gives you some points. And when you get retired, you get money by each point.
Get out your calculators. Look, the World Economic Forum releases a lot of really good studies, based on solid data. And they recently came out with a study. They listed the top 15 governments that had, in the World Economic Forum's wording, long-term visions for what their country was going to be. France didn't make the top 15. They were at the very bottom.
But was that study specifically about pensions?
It was about long-term vision, whether it was political, economic, and social. That the discussion here, Macron, sadly, who is a communicator, has sadly not been communicating. I go back to this, the necessity of this metamorphosis. And speaking as someone who is an EU citizen, but, a visitor in France, I can tell, the president and you as a representative in his parliament that you are really missing the boat by poo-pooing private investment pension plans, because this is what's going on everywhere else in the world. You may not like Donald Trump, but the fact is the 401k plans there that people are using for their retirement are booming. Now,
they're booming because the stock market's booming.
Right.
We'll
but
pick
look,
up on that point of what happens if the stock market heads
You're
south.
not doing this at the expense of a state pension.
We're gonna pick up on these points when we come back. Unfortunately, we have to take a quick break. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at the movement in France against pension reform, which this Tuesday had hundreds of thousands out on the streets across the country, a mix of hardliners and reformers against the measure. We're talking about it with Mireille Clapeau, Member of Parliament for La République En Marche, the political party of Emmanuel Macron. Ingrid Burgo, journalist for The Local France, the local.fr, is that how you say it?
Yeah, The Local France.
Okay.
Yeah.
Localist.
And Craig Capita is contributing editor at Quartz. A Harris, by the way, lots of reactions, I should say, on the hashtag F24debate, including one from Mark. All I want for Christmas is a train. Yes, there's a Harris Interactive poll that has 62% of the French supporting the strike, but 69% also want a Christmas break. The National Rail Company, the SNCF, say more than half of people will still have their seats over the holidays. 1/3 will be put on different trains the same day, and the others will be able to exchange for a different day.
We should be receiving a confirmation text, and we'll see what happens then. I'm a bit worried that I won't be able to return home after this weekend.
So there's those that are in the streets and those that are worried about going on vacation. And as we saw with that survey, Ingrid, sometimes everybody...
Sometimes it's a little bit of both.
Sometimes it's a little bit of both.
You can actually be pro, not the strike, not the transport strike, but support the movement against the reform and be pretty angry about missing your own train.
Is that something you explain to friends back in your native Norway, that the French notion of solidarity and strikes?
Well, yeah, I think as for Norwegians, it's hard to relate. Really, we're not a country of strikers. I'm worried. I'm getting Norwegians on my neck by saying this, but we are definitely not compared to France. Definitely has a reputation for being a country of striking more than.
Is it easy or hard to explain?
I think it's hard to explain because we have a negotiation model that's built on listening, in a sense. I'm saying this in a blunt way, but we have something that we're very proud to call the three-way cooperation, which is basically the
You
union.
have fewer people.
Yeah, we're fewer
have a
people,
lot fewer people.
but our model is also different. Whereas, if I understood correctly, this model has kind of been built on not negotiation, but consulting, which is not really the same thing. So the 2 years leading up to the announcing of the reform hasn't really been negotiation, right? It's been listening. And then now the unions are mad that the government didn't, as they say, really listen.
All right, on the eve of Tuesday's big demonstrations, ahead of Wednesday's government sit-down with the unions, call it a consultation, call it a negotiation, Emmanuel Macron has another problem, and that is the resignation of the architect of the reform. Jean-Emile Jamin has that story.
Bowing down to pressure. The architect behind France's controversial pension reform plans, Jeanpaul announced his resignation on Monday over his failures to declare outside income, stating that staying in his position threatened to undermine the efforts of the movement.
I'm guilty of being too light on the issue. I have paid for that. I have a duty of responsibility to set an example and to be completely transparent. That rule should apply to everyone, but to me most of all.
Pressure started to build this week after Delevoye admitted he failed to disclose several remunerated or volunteer activities on his transparency declaration form, filed 2 months after he entered government, something the French constitution prohibits.
I failed to declare those posts because I felt they fell under the realm of civic engagements.
At that level of responsibility, if you're incapable of filling out a simple form, of understanding the simple question, what positions have you held in the past 5 years, and completing the form correctly, you shouldn't be part of the government.
The political scandal erupted at a particularly sensitive time, with the pension reform leading to widespread protest and severe disruption on France's transport system. The resignation is a setback for Emmanuel Macron, who saw him as a trusted ally and one of the few cabinet members with experience in pensions.
So, Mireille Clapeau, how much of a setback is this, the resignation of Jean-Paul Delevoye?
Well, first of all, I would like to mention that I saw on the back of the vest Macron pension is 400 euros per month, which is completely false because the minimum will be 1,000 euros per month. So there are a lot of lies, fake news, etc. To answer to your questions, well, Jean-Paul Delevoye is a real nice man, a very clever man. He was the symbol of this reform, but of course he's not the only one because there are some good politicians that can do the job. I have to admit, even if I like him, that he made his career in a time where transparency and compliance with the rules was maybe not so important for the public opinion.
He said his wife is the one who handles accounts, and that's...
Yes, I would say...
Do you believe him?
In the former decades, it was admitted that you were a professional politician, and that it was not such a big mistake to have several jobs, one of them being with the wages, other being free. And, well, it's not the word anymore. This is now the rule that we established, that you have to be fully compliant with the rules. He resigned. Well, he made a good decision, I think.
So is this a good news or a bad news story? Because he's resigned because there are, as Mireille Clapeau just said, new laws that ban you from holding 1 million different positions in some cases, especially before you could be mayor. Yeah. And also these new disclosure laws.
I think it's very good news. I think it's positive for Macron.
So is France changing?
Yeah, like I said, first to protest, last to reform.
but maybe the reforms are happening in this case.
Well, it's just going to take time. You know, this is not something that can be done overnight. As you pointed out, I think it's a very good point. The French system of reaching an agreement, unlike Norway's, is pretty much argumentative, isn't it? So the whole system needs to be changed. And I don't think this is any secret to President Macron, nor the people who voted for him.
All right. In part one of our discussion, Ingrid Burgo saying this discussion was crying out for a trade unionist. Your wish is granted. Welcome at this point, Rémi Auffrère-Privel, Deputy Secretary General for the CFDT Trade Union Confederation's Rail Workers branch.
Yeah, rail worker.
Thank you for being with us here on France.
Thank you. It's very disturbing because traffic jam is awful, of course, because of the strike and demonstration today in Paris. And
Yeah, we met there.
It was a
There's no
very big
trains. Can you
success.
do something about that?
Yeah, we would like, and we're waiting for the good words from the Prime Minister tomorrow.
All right, let's delve right into it. It's now a question over whether or not the government will give on this issue of the so-called pivot age that we talked about it. Otherwise put, if you want a full retirement, you work until the age of 64.
In
terms of a universal system, one that creates social justice, which is something the French people were in favor of, that's been passed over by a purely budgetary logic. So we're now stuck in a sort of accounting technocracy when we should have been talking about justice and equality.
The pivot age is not central to the reform. On this, we agree with Laurent Berger. The most essential element is the point-based system.
So there you hear the education minister saying, we can negotiate about this issue of the pivot age. Are you saying, do you have the feeling there will be a compromise?
Why not? Why not? But we have discussed since 2 years. And then there's a lot of confusion about the government project for the new pension system in France. In fact, this is an essential issue, the pension system, because that's the question of dignity. Of course, we have observed a lot of other European countries to see what it works, what doesn't work, but we don't want to copy any other model, and we must know that 13% is the difference in life expectancy in retirement between white collars and workers.
Yeah, white-collar workers live longer than blue-collar workers.
Yeah,
because there's been a lot of
13 years.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk here in France. Some saying, "Oh yeah, those rail workers, they get to retire at 52. They have it easy."
No, that's finished now. That's a legend. Now it's finished. 52. It's finished for the drivers, for example. It's more, of course. It's 54. It's 54. Sometimes a little bit more. But in fact, you need to work more than around 35 years for your working life. And not drivers, it's only 8 or 10% of rail worker in the French railways. And the other workers, now it's more 15.5, 59.
So, Rémi,
15 years ago, it was 55 years old.
And what age do they start, most of them?
It depends. It depends because my place, for my example, I start at 16, very young, and I need to go till 58. But you can take your calculator. It's around less 42 years old. 32 for working life.
So I've asked everyone. Everyone else around the table. I have more gray hair than you, so I remember the strikes of 1986.
Yeah, I remember you.
And the strikes of 1995.
I come here only for strike and problems. You should invite me for modern issues.
Well, the station didn't exist yet in those days, but we did. But I do remember in 1986 the strikes continued through the Christmas period. Could we see the same thing this year?
We don't want it, because my union, CFDT, is in our DNA. First of all, first step is discussion and negotiation. We think that this government project was not well prepared. Too many confusion about the objectives. And for example, last week when the PM have decided to make a big speech, he starts his speech with 1845 and the French government with Communist Party and Gaullist and right and left. Yeah. It was a very interesting situation to build the actual pension system.
Because that's true. There was a government of national unity, and right after World War II, and that's when the current system was
we cannot understand this situation now. It was very history. And then he finished his speech with only a budget, a financial tool, financial objective. You understand what I mean? No. Because when he put 64 years old as a balanced age,
the pivot age.
Yes, he have decided to say the objective and the period to get to this objective. And we don't accept that. Why? Because he made a love proposition to the Parisianism. He said in his speech that we are very confident with union to bargain with the boss association, the other partner, the social partners,
business leaders association.
Yes, the business association, and he put his confidence. But in fact, at the end of the speech, he says, "Okay, 64 years old, and you have the time only before."
I would like to ask a question.
2027.
I would like to ask each of you a question.
Yeah.
Remy, first of all, you said before that, you've studied other pension systems around the world, and some of them aren't for you. Would the unions be willing to accept individuals in France creating their own individual pension system, like an IRA type of thing, a U.S. product, financial product, where they can control their own income, and if they tap into it before retirement, they're penalized, along with a state pension? That's question number one. The union's willing to see that. Question number two is the government, again, willing to allow that to happen? And what is the government's position right now vis-a-vis Remy's excellent points about blue-collar workers dying a lot sooner than white-collar workers? And I was brought up in a union town, and you are so right. What's the government's feeling about that particular position right now?
May I answer?
Yeah. I'd like to hear both things.
First of all, I would like to point out that your trade union, CFDT, if I'm right, is in favor of a unique system and a point system. So this is very important because we can criticize a lot of things, but we don't want to have a private-owned system. We want to maintain this wonderful system that was established just after World War II, and this is a common point we have.
Okay.
But it's true that blue collar and white collar do not have the same life when they are 60, and it's difficult because it's a matter of aging. You cannot tell a worker, well, you will die at 65, so we will give you more money. Or we will take some money from the white collar. Therefore, there must be discussions and negotiations now, and I hope that CFDT and the other unions will take their part in these discussions, because if we want to have a fair system, we have to consider the pensions, the age, and to add some points in case of harshness of the work, and we have to take in consideration the condition of working.
So no private pensions. You're in agreement, and you're in agreement on that, and you're in agreement on blue-collar workers needing to retire earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. So right now, from both of you, what specifically needs to happen for both of you to go to the Matignon Palace right now, reach an agreement, call a truce for the Christmas holiday, and get back to a negotiation in the new year? Specifically, what needs to happen?
The PM must say that, okay, it was only an idea, this 64 years
Vivid age
old,
is the big problem
privilege.
for you.
And then, no, because the PM must say, okay, it was only an idea, but you can not forget it because he had his speech last week, but a sort of
What's
things like that. To say, he must say, okay, I understand the message. We must be confident with about social partners to bargain this question of the balance of the system. Because in fact, there's not only the contribution, the financial question is not only a contribution from the companies and contribution from workers. We should keep a third contribution from the state, from the income on the capital. You understand what I mean?
No, I know exactly
because
what you mean.
if you want to find the balance,
The pension
of the
reserve
system,
fund, which you
yes.
have right now.
Yeah, not only because still now you have a sort of CSG. I don't know, the contribution sociale généralisée.
Social contribution.
Yeah, social contribution.
It's a
general.
tax on,
But
on
this kind of
revenues.
tax is, yes, capital, some revenue, financial revenue, a little bit about retired people too, and it's not so
All
good.
right, let me just one final point because we're running short on time here, and that is you mentioned how you didn't like the tone in the speech of the Prime Minister when he announced the reform last Wednesday. Part one of our discussion, Greg Capitas was saying how the French president's message has also been muddled. Last Friday, at a European summit in Brussels, Emmanuel Macron expressed solidarity with all our compatriots, he says, who suffer every day from the consequences of the strike.
This is a historic reform for our country. It is historic because we are going to rebuild a 21st century welfare state. And when I deem it appropriate, I will address the French people from Paris.
When I deem it right, it's...
Wow.
Mireille Clapeau, is he using the right language? Couldn't that seem a little bit haughty as a turn of phrase?
Well, it's true that it's a deep reform. It's a multifaceted reform. It's something which is complex because it's related to aging. And I think that it's historical in a way. So we have, and our colleagues from the trade unions have to face the responsibility. We want to maintain this system with solidarity.
Yeah.
We have to keep the good of it and to change the details that have to be changed. But it's historical.
Last year with the Yellow Vest movement, Ingrid Bergo, Emmanuel Macron rolled with the punches by organizing those town hall meetings, which proved popular. Can he roll with the punches this time when he's not facing a leaderless movement here? He's facing the trade unions.
I think they're better at dealing with the unions, the government, in a sense, because they know how to deal with them. They don't know how to, they never figure out how to deal with the Gilets jaunes in a sense. But I think Emmanuel Macron has done very wise to stay out of this because, yeah, we're seeing him there. But the one that's been throwing the punches is Edouard Philippe.
The Prime Minister.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but I just have a question because there's one thing that our viewers might not know is that the CFDT, you are talking about the universal point-based model. You want it, but the other unions don't want it. So is there any way that both needs can be met? Because you have a lot of unions that are saying scrap the system or we're going to stay in the streets.
They have to be responsible. I think that we are in democracy. We are attached to this system. We are attached to the freedom of demonstration, the freedom of strike. But at the end, there must be an end and democracy.
Can there be?
That's a very good question. The Gilets jaunes are still on the street.
And the other trade unions, the CGT, the
Can there be a consensus?
With all unions or with my union?
All unions.
All unions.
No, I don't.
I don't think so.
Honestly, I don't think so because they have decided to have a political view completely different with us, with the French union CFDT and with UNSA. The CGT and SUD have decided to say no for this kind of new reform that we are in favor.
So no Christmas truce?
I don't think so.
Is that your takeaway?
No, there's a problem, especially for railways workers, because last week the PM have decided to keep silence about the strike in rail. Or we have a big union in CFDT. The big union is the drivers, the locomotive drivers. And now they are on strike at 50 or 60%. And it's very important. That's why
the reason I asked this is real quick. The reason I asked this right now, there are hundreds and hundreds, not thousands of people on their way to France for Christmas. And a lot of them are saying they're not going to come because they can't get a clear answer on whether there's going to be a truce over Christmas. So the answer is likely no truce.
Tomorrow PM must say something for railways workers.
All right, so it's going to be a crucial day on Wednesday. Rémi Auffrère-Privel, I want to thank you. I want to thank Mireille Clapeau. Craig Capitas, Ingrid Burgo. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there. Yes, it would appear that the humble bicycle, has become the symbol of these round of strikes.
We're devoting a year-end edition of the debate to that very topic.
Exactly. And the Paris city account today tweeted out this image, along with some celebratory figures, saying that as many bikes as cars are actually being used in the capital right now, courtesy of the strikes. La Croix has branded the bike the little queen of the strike. And it's saying that while trains are paralysed and obviously cars are stuck in record traffic jams, the bike lanes are themselves recording record figures.
Because these bike lanes are new to Paris for the most part.
Absolutely. And it's up to 3 times the usual number of cyclists using those new bike lanes. And what they say in this article is that back in 1995, when there were huge, very lengthy strikes, lots of people took to their bikes then, but it wasn't feasible for them to continue once the strikes were over, because the bike lanes that we now have just weren't around. And they think that a lot of people are going to actually switch to the bikes because they're realising how Paris has become so much more user-friendly for people on 2 wheels. So it will be interesting to see whether that trend continues. However, there's another trend which is slightly more alarming, and that is that the number of accidents involving people going around on 2 wheels has gone up by 40%. That's according to the sapeurs-pompiers, the fire brigade, who get called out to these things. It's not just bikes, it's trottinette, those silly little scooter things that you zoom around on the pavement.
That's conjecture there, Emma.
Absolutely. And I'll fight you if you want on it. Mopeds and electric bikes as well. And it's not just because there are more of them around, because obviously that's part of it. It's also the fact that it's a lot of people who aren't used to being out on the streets on this kind of particular mode of transport.
And wear headphones as well.
Absolutely. And they have actually issued a warning to people saying, look, please wear helmets, please use lights. You wouldn't think it needed to be said. But anyway, one of the other big hazards is actually anger on the roads. And I've witnessed this myself, trying to drive around. Everyone is mad. This guy says he was out on his bike for just 15 minutes and was insulted 3 times. I won't give you the exact translation of the word that he...
It's a family show. Watch.
Exactly. But what he says is, have a drink and keep your anger for the president, which is an interesting one. And finally on this one, it really is pretty chaotic when you get lots of bikes out there.
You got English boss there quoted.
Yes, indeed. It's a jungle out there, says, say quite a few people, I think, because there are an awful lot of people on bikes flying around. Some of them know more about the rules of the road than others, it has to be said. So yes, it will be interesting to see if this trend continues. Now, with regard to that issue of helmets, it is interesting to note that there is no rule in Paris. You don't have to wear one. And it would rather meddle with the idea of sort of chicly gliding around with the wind in your hair if we were all forced to wear helmets while we're doing it.
All right, you don't like the scooters. I don't like people wearing headphones. How can you wear
headphones?
When you...
I don't like bikes, full stop.
Oh, well.
We don't get on.
Emma James, many thanks. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.